Hey guys, Gemma from ASD Rocks. This is going to be a really triggering one for some people because I'm going to use some words that are not politically correct. They're not socially acceptable. And I need you to understand that what I'm doing is explaining my thought process from 20 years ago. I was having this conversation with someone, I can't remember who it was, and I thought it's actually really important and valid to tell this story to you. So I'm going to talk about when I first ever saw Southern Autistic School. Beau was diagnosed, as you guys know, his official diagnosis came through when he was 2. And immediately I went out looking for speech therapists, occupational therapists, programs. We had what was called the Elwyn Moray Early Intervention Program out at Monash University in Clayton. Everything I could find, I went to do. And one of the things I found was Southern Autistic School's Early Education Program. So they took kids from 2 years and 8 months old. That was as early as you could have your child in a program. And I remember, so the first thing that happened was that they invited me to the end of year school performance, which was so it must have been towards the end of the year that I don't know, but yeah, it would have been, because he was diagnosed officially in February at 2, and 8 months later, when he was able to go to the school, would have been near the end of the year. And I remember walking into the hall and seeing these kids up on stage. Some of them verbal, some of them not, some of them able to do the acts, some with help of an aide directly behind them moving their arms or whatever. And I burst into tears immediately. I burst into tears because I didn't think my kid would ever be able to do that. Understanding that he didn't even understand me at this age, just was so not there. And then so I was bawling my eyes out in the back of this, and I stayed for a few of each of the year levels or whatever it was, and then I left. And I was invited for a tour because I wanted to enroll Beau, and I was invited to a tour of the school. And it was probably the most confronting moment I have ever had in my life. So I turned up to Southern Autistic School. I believe I went without Beau. Now, they've had massive renovations in the last 20 years and the place is looking absolutely amazing. But 20 years ago, it was not like that. Most of the classes were most of the classrooms were those, the government offered these portable, they're called portable classrooms. So, and the infrastructure, you know, was just not what it is today. Everything was behind locked gates. It's a little bit like entering ye old sanitarium, you know, like a mental institution. These big bars, like a prison, because the kids are flight risks. You know, it's just what they had to have. It's not that they were trying to look intimidating or distressing or whatever it happens to be, but it just was, you know. And you walked in and they were showing me all the younger classrooms. They showed me the gym, and they had a swimming pool there. That was one of the amazing things, that because there's such a high rate of drowning amongst specifically autistic children, their program included teaching kids to swim. It was really, really important because there is such a high number of autistic children drownings. So they showed me the gym, and they showed where they did, you know, when I say gym, I mean like just a large area, you know, sort of brick building where they had, you know, stairs. You could climb upstairs and then climb downstairs, and they had, you know, just things that occupational therapy type stuff, classic stuff. So don't think gym like a school, you know, with trampolines or bouncy floors or anything like that. It was just sort of more occupational therapy type things. But when I went to see the classes, I was horrified. I was shocked. You know, there were kids, so they had 8 children in a class, 2 teachers. Amazing. So basically 4 to 1, which is phenomenal by any standards. Obviously, you have to understand that the younger a child is diagnosed, the more severe they are. So all of the children that were in these early schools were severe. One of the kids, they had his, you know, jumper hooked around the back of the chair because to stop him from rocking off the chair. So they, you know, they had hooked the back of his jumper over it. It would minimize the amount of rocking so he wouldn't fall off the chair and rock off the chair. At one stage when I was walking through, there was an older child, probably, I would say probably maybe 10 or 12. And there were 4 people, you know, with ear defenders on and protective gear, carrying him, and he was fitting, having a full mental autistic breakdown. And they were carrying, because he was a big kid, it took 4 people to, you know, one on sort of each limb, to protect themselves, to get him into the quiet room where he could calm and they could work on calming him. But to see this, it was so confronting. There, you know, looking into the rooms, in my head, it was literally like, my kid, these kids are retarded. the actual definition of retarded. I know it's not a socially acceptable word to use, but there's a reason that that word exists, because it actually does describe exactly what I saw. And I was so terrified, and it was so brutal, and it was so confronting that my child needed to be in this place, you know. And they were sitting there with the kids and, you know, doing what you do with retarded children. You know, they had their hands and they were moving them around on the tables with different textures, through either like a shaving cream or over rice, or, you know, I mean, look, these people that work at this place, I do not know one government official that works as hard or does as good a job as these angels that are put on this earth to work with these children. Because if it hadn't have been for Bo going there, he would not be who he is. You know, I don't think one of the kids was toilet trained. Certainly Bo wasn't. The reality of how severe my son was, the reality of how much help he needed, the reality of what I was seeing, and I needed to see it, was so confronting and heartbreaking that and so necessary. The work they did there, you know, each program was so specific to each child. 8 kids in a class, 2 qualified teachers working on the most basic of basic abilities which would come naturally to any normal child. I mean, my hat is off to these people, but it is an assault on the eyes when you go to these places, especially for me, who didn't know anything about a disability. I didn't know anything about autism. I didn't know anything. I was a first-time mum, and I had this gorgeous little, absolutely stunning, fat little bundle of flesh back when he was on bottles, because he was getting the nutrition that he needed. And I was exposed. So there used to be what was called the Spastic Society when I was a kid, and they had loads of kids there with, like, for example, spina bifida, or I mean, just so many different. I think the reason that they had the term the Spastic Society, no one considered back then that you know, that was a bad word. It was just the word as the word retard, meaning retarded as in you are behind. autistic children are retarded because they are behind. They are not spastic by definition of the English words. So I think it's really important that we understand not that these words that I'm using are slurs. I'm using them as the actual definition of the reason that these terms were created. The fact that some idiot kids took those words that were created to describe exactly what they were meant to describe, and then turned them into slurs by calling neurotypical kids a spastic or a retard is the only reason they became bad words. But they were never intentionally created to be bad words. And what I was seeing 20 years ago when I walked in were severely retarded children in what felt like, when you walked through an old school, mental institution, because these gates and locks and, there's people carrying full-sized humans with protection and ear defenders, and the initial shock of that, so different to what it actually was when we were there, when we started going. Once you actually got past that and saw what was being given, it was, the place no longer held that sort of connotation to me. But I just want you to understand that when I first went to this place, I just looked around and all I saw was severely retarded people, which appeared to be these were the words that went through my head. These were the things that I saw. These feelings of my kid is a retard. He is retarded. He needs to go to a school where they have gates and padlocks and you can't access them during the day at all. Once your kid's in that school, unless someone brings them out to you, you cannot access that school. It is behind a locked gate. No parent can get in. You can't walk your child to class. They're dropping them off in the morning. The first few times is a horrific sight of children screaming, non-verbal children screaming, the sounds they were making, being dragged into these classrooms, and there was nothing you could do about it, nothing at all. The gate was locked and your child was in there until 3:30, whatever it was, when you picked them up, and you had to wait out the front of the gates when they were brought out one by one, classroom by classroom, so as not to upset the other kids. What we perceive is not what is going on in reality. And I thank God, or whatever you do or don't believe in, for the existence of these places, because without them, I don't know what anyone would do. They are the most phenomenal places I've ever seen in my life.